This episode of the Leap Forward podcast is brought to you by Bridge LT, leaders in conversational learning and innovation. Through AI role plays, technical simulators, and comprehensive training programs, Bridge LT is revolutionizing the future of corporate and enterprise education.
In this Leap Forward podcast episode, Sarah Dawson shares her journey from retail to leadership roles in the automotive industry. She highlights the importance of transferable skills like communication and coaching when helping managers shift from autocratic to consultative leadership. Sarah discusses how technology like Zoom and Teams enhances training, advocating for flexible modular learning. Tune in for a dose of inspiration.
I'm absolutely delighted to welcome as my guest on this Bridge Learning Technologies Leap Forward podcast series, Sarah Dawson.
Good morning.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good.
Thank you for joining us. You've worked independently across a whole variety of different sectors, from public, private, and the third sector, and you've been a leadership coach, trainer, assessor over that kind of period. This is obviously a series. It's all about learning. It's all about development. It's all about skills. So can't really think of a better person than to kind of have a conversation with in that sense. But for those that don't know you, how about you give us a little bit of a kind of what got you to this point? Give us a career journey to date.
Okay. All right. Gosh. Well, let's just sit back. I think it starts at home. And starts with being a child and being in a family. I was the oldest of three, and one who always was looking, was inquisitive, and wanted to do. So the fact that I have a lot of time, I spend a lot of time now working within the motor industry, is kind of where I started. And my dad ran a dealership, Vauxhall dealership, and I used to go in with him on a Saturday and pretend I was his secretary, and putting calls through to him and using the switchboard, and that progressed through to my one of my first jobs was retailing, working for Boots and also House of Fraser, but also delivering cars for him. So going down to London, and in fact, only yesterday went past Lord's Cricket Ground and the hotel that was then there, and sort of telling my granddaughter that way back when I was with a lovely Jewish gentleman who took us out for lunch, having delivered his new car, and allowed me to have a pork at a table to eat with him, but also told me that Yorkshire puddings that I wanted at that time were made for pork and not for beef. And, just fabulous stories going back over that time. But my career then, as I say, retailing took me into Marks and Spencer's. Back at school, I'd actually wanted to be a doctor, but I wasn't bright enough at that time to get the right S levels and A levels that I needed. So went into retail and joined Marks and Spencer. And in a year where they were very tight on recruitment, so I was delighted to have got my slot, and went and had a very, very happy career with them for 15, 16 years. So going through, and really, I think a lot of what I do today, a lot of my values came from home and also through Marks and Spencer, and loved it. Absolutely loved it. But then along came a young family, working Saturdays, and that sort of thing started to get a little bit in the way of wanting to do family things. But I left them once I had twin boys and my lovely daughter, and was asked, had a phone call, would you come and join us? And went to join an organisation that at that point was called AGA. So, and it wasn't the All Girls Association, which a lot of people thought. It was the lady who'd set it up, Anne Gray Associates, and she was setting up a team of people to work kind of remotely. And having sort of gone through the panic of thinking, oh my goodness, how credible am I going to be in that environment, to turn on my first day in a Ford Motor dealership, Crystal Ford of Harrogate, meeting the dealer principal and having a lovely day there, walking out and saying, blimey, I can do it. And all transferable. So yeah, that kind of gets me into the motor industry, and really that's the last good few years. Won't say too many because a lady never shares her age, and I have that. Career has just evolved. It's come about. What I'm doing today, is that what I thought I was going to be doing all those years ago? Absolutely not. But I'm just somebody who has had a fantastic career, wonderful opportunities, but I have just grabbed opportunities that have turned up in front of me and said, yeah, let's go for it. So that's kind of what I've done. I hope that gives a bit of an outline and an impression where I came from. But as I say, started at home and here I am today.
Thank you. That's really interesting, and I love the link between sort of home, family, and then the Marks and Spencers sort of story, which I've heard so many people talk about how Marks and Spencers really cared about development and investing in their people, and we talk about how do you build a business and a sustainable business a lot. And M&S is often used as a great sort of example of how exactly how you do that right back from the early days. You also talked about transferability as well, which I think is really interesting. So tell me a little bit about sort of what it was that you realized you had as transferable skills when you first walked into that sort of Ford dealership.
Just being able to communicate, talk to people. Being a dealer principal is quite a lonely, I got to find out, is quite a lonely place. So you are the senior manager in a business that is probably not your business. You're doing it for somebody else, but you are therefore accountable for all that happens within your business, and you're accountable to a board. And quite often, those guys and girls had no one else really to talk to. So, I built some fantastic relationships with some of these guys working with. So, a bit of a sounding board, somebody that they could talk to, maintain confidentiality. I wasn't going to go running down the streets. You'll never guess what I've heard, kind of today. And providing that sounding board, but also able to then bring in what I'd learned as a manager myself, working in an environment where people development was important, but how you get those messages across to people. So found myself naturally coaching people. I had gained a coaching and a counselling qualification in M&S, but just found that was my natural style. And when I reflect back to friends, to relationships, it's somebody that I've always been somebody that somebody can talk to somehow, whether it's I've got two ears, I use a lot of this, but still got two ears and listen to people. And I think that was one of the biggest things. But then listening and then reflecting back to them what they've said to me and asking them what they wanted to do next. And it wasn't something they were normally used to people telling them what to do. Not actually asking those questions and getting them to draw upon their own thoughts, their own views, establishing really what the facts were of situations before anybody made decisions. So I think that was probably one of the biggest thing. And through that, earned their trust to go into their businesses, to talk to their teams, to listen to their service teams, their sales executives, how they were talking to people on the telephone, what they said to customers, how they were talking to their staff. And then knowing that if I went back and reflected back to him, not in a telltale, but this is what I've observed, and there would normally be a, kind of a end of the day report about what I'd seen and what I'd learned, and ask them what they wanted to do about that. And them giving them that ownership to they could do something. It wasn't about me. It had to come from within, and getting them to grow and develop. And that I think that was probably key to what we were doing at that time.
That's really interesting. Being able to establish that trust, in a situation where you're walking in, really, really, really challenging. When you sort of found and sort of passed on that sort of ownership of kind of what do they want to do about it, how were you then involved beyond that?
Well, helping to either develop the training, so would work with them to develop the training, to get their permission, maybe to sit and to coach people by the telephone, not hello, rather good morning, good afternoon, so and so speaking, how may I help you? Um, you know, Fitting in with what Ford wanted, that the phone had to be answered within so many rings, and all of that. So there was some basic stuff, but just engaging people at all levels. So, the way in which you spoke to the dealer principal wasn't the way that you necessarily spoke to a service advisor. It was, but it was much more just adapting the style to the individuals and to the people. And what is lovely now, I can still go into some of those dealerships or and see those people. And it's, hi, Sarah, how are you? And, people that you've known all those times. And it was just about engagement. It was about not getting down to their level, but just engaging with them at their level, so that we were a team and I was part of their team. So I earned their trust too, that this was going to be good going forward and it was going to make things easier for them.
And when you were having those conversations with dealer principals to try and uncover kind of what their challenges were, what was keeping them up at night, and so forth, what were the kind of typical kind of challenges that they were facing? Was there a kind of a sort of common sort of like set of those that was quite repeatable, or you heard it kind of a few times, and also I suppose over time, have those challenges remained the same? Are they is it, or are there new challenges now that you think sort of dealerships face?
I think at that time it was them beginning to recognize their approach needed to be different in how they engage with people, and follow my example. So do as I do, follow me, and mirror, using good questions rather than just telling people what to do. Managers in those days were quite autocratic, quite dictatorial. They would just tell people, almost JFDI, and this is what's going to happen, and you're going to do it now. And it's actually, oh, whoa! Now just think about that. If somebody told you to do that, how how would you think? And I think management training is something that has changed that. I think the sector has bought into that, into development of people, and the fact that people management is really important. It shouldn't be, just JFDI. It is about, having that engagement, having that confidence to have conversations with people, but allowing them to speak as well and to hear their side of the story. And I think that is something. There's still a long way to go. Don't get me wrong. We're nowhere near the finished article, but we are a lot further forward. And so nowadays, when I'm doing assessments of managers, and one of the things that they have to do, one of the activities they have to do, is to carry out a one-to-one review of somebody who has potentially been with them about a month, and conducting that one-to-one review, listening to some of those people, guys, girls, whatever, managers, sales managers, service managers, having those conversations with people is a world apart to what I initially was witnessing. It was like, back in the day, it was come in my office, sit down, and then you'd see everybody purple in the face and, wagging fingers and fist banging on desks and, all of that. And it's changing, and I think that is definitely for the better, that's come around, and I think therefore, and also sort of people who became dealer principals, it was were often the service sales manager. Service managers often didn't get a look in, for that sort of thing. So it was whoever was the sales manager was made the dealer principal. And I think that's changed now. It's about recognizing that there are certain skills and qualities that people need in order to be a good leader. It's not just about managing a process, it's about leading a team. And those skills, I think, are now recognized much more than they used to be. I hope that gives you a flavor of what
Yeah.
I'm witnessing.
Absolutely. And I think contextualizing that as well with how the market and the industry has changed in terms of huge transformational threats and opportunities, all the way through the kind of your kind of career, I suppose, in a sense. How has that sort of impacted not just kind of what you teach and what you train, but also how you train and how you teach?
Well, I think again, it's much more consultative. It's much more. I would say my training has become more facilitation. Get my teeth in, than stand-up training. So you're not standing, do this, do that. This is what we. You need to get a message across, but it's much more facilitation. It's much more getting the buy-in of the people that you are communicating with, that you are teaching, in order to get that on board. And I think the activities, making it interactive, making sure that they get an opportunity to go and work in breakout groups, whether you're online or as I do an awful lot of mine. So using Teams and using breakout rooms for people to go and have those smaller discussions, then come back into a plenary discussion is so valuable, so that we hear their voices and we hear what's really going on, because they are the girls and boys who are doing the job every day, what the difficulties are, what they're facing up with, what the customer issues are, which probably haven't changed a lot since, over the sort of over the period, over 30 years, whatever. A lot of what we want as customers is exactly the same. But as a customer, we are much more informed. We've got much more information at our fingertips. But, within a dealership, we shouldn't be making an assumption about that. We still need to inquire and get the customer to share with us, what they know. So, for example, if you've got a customer coming in inquiring about a particular model of a vehicle, rather than just assuming they know exactly what they want and that is the right car for them, we still need to go back and to qualify, to be interested in them. What is it about that vehicle they feel is right for them? Find out what they're currently driving, all those good things. And so it's a different approach. It's not, well, this is the car we've got and this is the one that I'm going to sell you today. It's as a customer, because I really want them. I'm very happy with the 6-month wait, the 36-week wait I need for my car, because that is the car that is right for me, not the purple one with pink spots that is sitting in your car park and you'd like me to, move on for you. So I think, that whole training and looking at it and softer approach, I think we need to be much more versatile. But we can't assume that everybody is the same. And again, it's really interesting when I'm talking to people and helping them to settle down at the beginning of their assessment. And I ask them how they, depending on the manufacturer, regardless almost the manufacturer they're working for, how have they found the training they've had and how did they get that training? Was it in person? Was it via Zoom or Teams? Was it sort of, remote online questionnaires? How have they got it? And it varies hugely, but also it varies hugely as to what works for different people. And, we still need to have the face-to-face hands-on people, because people learn better that way. Some people can read a manual and be absolutely fine, go away and do exactly what the manual said. Other people need coaching. Other people need to have a go, get feedback, and then have another go. So, we need to it not be prescriptive, and it isn't one kind of training suits everybody, because it doesn't, because we are all different. You and I are very different, Justin. The way in which we learn is different, and we have to recognize in that other people and be able to get one message across 3 or 4 different ways, so that people have got that opportunity to pick up that hook and take it forward.
And you mentioned Zoom and you mentioned Teams, and that a lot of part of your role today is using online. How have you seen sort of technology used to really help drive those sort of
Oh,
outcomes?
God. Well, I think there's a few things really. First of all, if you are in the north of Scotland as a dealership and you're being asked to go to Doncaster or down to, Milton Keynes for training, well, that is at least an overnight stay. The cost involved in that for the dealer is huge. So, and people don't like to be away from home, in a lot of cases, more than absolutely necessary, and particularly, I think, since COVID. And I think that therefore having you been able to use Teams and or Zoom or whatever is absolutely fantastic, because we can get to those people for the 2 hours, the 3 hours of training that they need, not the day either side for traveling to have that, a few hours of input. So you've overcome people's resistance or, oh, I've got to go on training. It's more that, they know what they're doing and why they're doing. So that appeals to people. And I think it's about how interactive you make it. I've mentioned earlier about breakout rooms. You can get them to use the chat so they can engage and ask questions with one another. They can use emojis. You can get a round of applause or whatever it might be coming from people when, somebody else has said something. So you're getting that interaction. I think one of the biggest frustrations for me is when they won't turn their cameras on. And I absolutely like to see the whites of people's eyes, and I like to see the person that I'm talking to. But sometimes they are being forced to do their training with a headset on in a place that probably isn't very suitable for that engagement. So ideally, like them to be in a separate room or an office away from what's going on around them. But sometimes that's not afforded to them. So that is very frustrating. And because they don't want us to see where they are, or because it wouldn't be appropriate for us to see where they are, they don't put their cameras on, and you lose that engagement. So you can use lots of different ways, and gradually, I think if you can get people into a breakout room fairly quickly, they'll tend to turn them on. And when they come back into the main room, they've got them on, and then it's interesting how many of them just leave them on. So you get that engagement. But it's nice being able to, rather than saying put your hand up so I can see that you want to talk to me, I can see somebody, and I can engage with them saying, oh, Fred, you want to say something? So you can respond as if I was in the room with them. So I think that is a challenge with training. If you're obviously doing questionnaires, or people are answering quizzes or doing things online, then that again is very efficient. As far as you're asking the question, they're giving the answer, you're going to get a response. There's no marking required. So those are great ways of doing things. But so technology has really, I think, benefited in many ways. And people say, oh, how can you coach online? Well, you can. It is absolutely possible. Nothing like having a good hug at the end of it, which you can't quite do down IT, or if you've had a difficult conversation with someone. But it works perfectly well, and I think people are definitely, as 2024 goes on top of 2023, it's becoming much more the norm.
Fascinating. And you talked a little bit about levels, and my question here is really around, I suppose, in a sense, also the point you were making around making your training adaptive in a way. How, when you think of the automotive sector now, I think the IMI is talking about, what is it, like 268 roles or something along those sorts of lines. How does your training and the learning adapt based on the role? If you're a service advisor, if you're in technical, or if you're in one of those other 268 roles, how do you adapt it for that?
Well, it that actually brings about another thing, which is job titles. Because and a perfect example is that in a number of dealerships they'll have business managers, for example. And you'll have business managers who just are responsible for the F&I of the business, and they just link in with sales executives as they are, and customers as they are required, and that is all they do. But in another business, the business manager is also the assistant sales manager, so is responsible for, on the sales manager's day off, for managing the team and coordinating with the team. So job titles is actually a bit of an issue, and it's about more looking about what are you in your business expecting people to do. So you can have sales executives, you have sales advisors, but then we also have showroom assistants and showroom advisors, or we have handover experts, or we have geeks, people who know all the techie stuff. And in another business, that is one person. They are the sales executive, they are the sales advisor, and they do all of that. You have a technician in a workshop. It could be a technician, you're a master technician. It could be that you just do EV. It could be that you are somebody who doesn't do EV, but you are at the stage in your career where you're just doing PDIs and some of the lower hanging fruits as far as that is concerned. And then you've got businesses that have workshop controllers and those that don't. And workshop controlling is probably one of the most difficult jobs in the within a dealership, because they're having to keep the technicians happy, but they're also making sure the service advisors are getting all the information that they need. So the training needs to be flexible, and it could be, depending on the role that you're at, it almost needs to be put into modules, so people can cherry pick what is right for their role in their business. So it's breaking down. Okay, so what bits do we need? So we have service advisors who do all their own bookings. There are other organizations who have remote contact center teams who do all the bookings. And these guys, in the business, do not do it. They're almost not allowed to do it. And you get those that do everything. So I think the approach, particularly online, and it gives you that opportunity, is to be able to create modules that you can cherry pick depending on the role. So a business manager could just be F&I and need to do their FCA and all of that. Another one might need to also do some people management training, in addition to, etc. So I think we've got a fantastic flexibility using training online to make sure we can tailor it to meet the needs of the business. And also, for example, one manufacturer having that for all their different branches because of the different companies that are franchising to them.
I love this idea of a sort of modular approach to kind of development. I think that's really exciting. And clearly, we've reached the stage now where the world is moving so fast. We need to kind of continually, upskill, reskill, and this concept of sort of lifelong learning, I suppose, that sort of exists now. How do you instill that inside an organization?
I think it's about fluid, as you talk about. This fluidity is really important, but we need to engage everybody. So everybody needs to understand what the vision is. So managers need to translate the vision to their teams to say the reason why you're going on this training. We need to be forward looking. We can't stand still. I've for lots of different reasons banned the word normal from the English language, because there's no such thing. Everything is constantly changing and moving forward. So we need to be forward looking, we need to be open to change, and we need to be open to learning. Every day, regardless of how old you are, how long you've done your job, is a school day. We can all learn something new from somebody. And I think to do that, we need great people skills. We need to be able to manage change and help to guide and negotiate our teams through that change. So managers need to have great interpersonal skills in order to do that too. They also need to have good time management skills. And this is something that has just been, is forever. All managers, regardless of the sector, need to have great time management skills. So to be able to prioritize, to be able to look to the future, to keep that vision going forward. So where do we want to be in 5 years' time? How are we going to get there? And I like to describe it as a bit like, I live in Yorkshire, and to get down to London, I could get on a train in Harrogate, in York or Leeds to get down. I could get on the A1, I could go on the M1, I could then go down the A14, I could go down the M40 and still get to the M25 and then decide where I want to get off to get into London. So there's many routes to go. It is not just one route, and it's opening people's minds to keep constantly reviewing that, to look at the vision, where are we going, and what do we need to change and adapt to ensure we have the most efficient and effective journey of learning for people, and we'll pick up the gaps and the changes as we go along.
What a very apt metaphor that you just chose there. It's brilliant. You must have come across this. You come into an organization, and for whatever reason, there is not necessarily that sort of real appreciation of the value of what you do and the power and the impact that has. How do you go about, I suppose, in a sense, putting and presenting the business case for learning and development inside organizations?
Is drawing a deep breath, drawing on every amount of patience that I have, which sometimes it isn't a lot, gritting my teeth and putting to them the consequences of not. So, asking them what could be the consequences if X, Y, and Z didn't happen. So if they don't consider the customer, for example, if they don't work in such a way that we're going to have 100% satisfied customers, what will happen? Customers will make choices, they'll leave, they won't come back, and by doing that, and just being patient and being assertive, broken record technique, keep repeating what you're saying to people, but also celebrating the quick wins with them. So once as I said, about earning their trust, and then it can be about celebrating some of those quick wins. Yes, this is what I heard today. That's fantastic. X, Y, and Z happened. So keeping your eyes and ears open, with people. But yeah, and people training back in the day, still today, I guess, was the first thing that got cut off people's budgets. We can't, no, we're cutting that. Where actually that is where you should be investing. It's about invest now, train people, get it right from the beginning, and then you'll have fewer mistakes that you need to repair, go back, cover up. It's less expensive because you're not having to do something for free or to make things better for the customer. And I think reflecting back to them, their own, and often it will be things that have gone well before. So where you've got bias, and sometimes that there can be bias towards situations and the ways of doing things. But if you can find something where something similar has worked before and get them to recognize that helps them to pick that up and take it forward. And it's just focus on them, focus on their vision, what they're wanting to achieve. And if you can help them to get to their goal, then they'll keep going.
You talked about cost cutting and training, learning, development being potentially one, which I subscribe to in one sense, but also violently disagree with on another. But in terms of the challenges that you see that we face today in the sector, what are those big challenges that we face, and how are you thinking about overcoming them?
I think one of them is that that you don't always need an outsider to come in to do the training. So if you can develop your managers to have a succession plan and to develop the next stage of managers coming through who are working in a good way, have bought into it, that they in turn are training the teams. In a sense, if they were, the managers and the business was doing their job properly, they wouldn't need us to go in. other than to introduce a new concept, a new idea, and then for them to cascade it down through their business. So that would be, kind of one way. And I think that so long as managers are getting the training, it's then the coaching that they need in order to utilize the skills in best way for them, so that regardless of the business that they're in, so it's picking up what is the key learning that they've taken from a course or from a module, what are the new challenges that they're currently facing, and coaching them through it. So they're not being told how to do it, they're working out how to do it for themselves. And that's where I think coaching comes in as a really helpful tool. But I also think recruiting the right people. So when new vacancies come up, making sure that we're recruiting the right people to come into a business. And so often I hear, oh, Sarah, we put an advert out and, we only had 2 people apply, and we invited them both for interview and one didn't turn up. So we employed the other one. And I said, just because they were breathing and they turned up, no, not necessarily having the skills or the qualities, and understanding the consequences and the cost to them, to their business, of not recruiting the right people in the first place. So that is another piece that feeds into this, I think, as well. Yeah. So I think, we've got everything is changing very quickly. And if you wind the clock back 50 years, the changes that we've had in the last 5 years supersede what has changed in the last 50 years. And it's going to keep going at that pace. So we need to be working to speed. We need to be working efficiently. We need to be effective. We need to be thinking ahead. We need to be brave. We need to be brave.
I love that. That's a great summary of I think where we are right now and how we overcome it. A couple of really quick questions for you. You've talked about time management being a really key sort of skill. What are the other things that you think you need to have to be a great manager, a great leader?
2 ears, 1 mouth. So, give your guys the chance, and also as a manager, to collaborate. You don't have to have all the answers, and more often than as not, your team have got better answers and ideas than you have. Just ask them, carry out a SWOT analysis with them and sort of say, to the team, okay, what are we good at? What are our weaknesses? Find out from them, see what opportunities they recognize, but also get them to identify the threats. And together, you're then going to put forward an action plan that everybody's going to have bought into. So I think that is really important. But I think also to accept when things have gone wrong, and to take it on the chin and say, right, okay, that didn't go terribly well. What can we do? How can we do it differently? What can we do? How can we do it differently? So that, when we have done something wrong, admit it. That's whether it's to staff, whether it's to customers, but then to say, but this is what we're going to do about it. Negotiate with a customer, and that will keep your customers coming back, because if you'll get their loyalty by taking them seriously, by looking after them, and bringing that through. So as a manager, collaborate, involve your team, make time, prioritize, think ahead, be proactive. Don't be chasing your tail. Plan for the next things weeks, months in advance. Think about what you need to do in order to do that, and kind of work backwards so you know when you need to start doing something, rather than, oh my goodness, we need it tomorrow and it's 3 weeks work and I've only got tonight. So, making sure you are eliminating as many of those instances, minimizing those occasions.
And lastly, going back to the beginning, I suppose, in a sense, you talked about recruitment and the importance of bringing in the right folks, from day one, sort of thing. We all started somewhere as well. What advice would you give to someone who was considering starting out their career in this sector?
It is a wonderful time to be joining the sector. I mean, the technology of the vehicles, the fun. It is much more professional than it used to be. Looking at the opportunities for people to shine. I've mentioned that there used to be just one role of a sales executive, and now that can be broken down into several. You can have one role as a technician. Somebody is always still going to need to be on the spanners, who is really good with their hands. Almost to be a technician these days, they need to be IT literate. They need to be so IT literate. So just being good with your hands isn't necessarily going to make you, a good technician. So I think it's we perhaps need to be making sure as an industry that we are sharing that with people and sharing the diversity of the roles and the opportunities within, and what the skills and qualities that for those roles. I'm being honest about it. This is what we're looking for. Is this what you've got? And that goes way back to when we had again with Ford, a recruitment program, whereby we went about in a completely different way, getting managers to think about what is it that they needed for the role, and getting them to think about the skills, the qualities, some of the personal attributes that were needed within their team, so that when we were recruiting, we were asking the right questions. When we were interviewing, they were asking the right questions to make sure they were getting people who are fit for purpose for the future, not for 10 years ago. So it's about, that whole recruitment is just another whole thing. It's another management skill. Add that to the list as well.
That's another podcast. Listen, Sarah, thank you so much for sharing some of your wisdom today. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the Leap Forward podcast today. Thanks for joining me.
No, thanks, Justin. Absolute pleasure. Thank you.